Hi, I'm Tracy, VE3TWM. Thank you for tuning in to Outdoors on the Air. This video is based on a presentation I have given to various ham radio clubs across North America. I've decided to post it here on my channel in case you might find something of value in the content. I've titled the presentation Answering the Call, as a nod to Jack London's Call of the Wild book. The presentation is geared to the HF Portable novice and conveys the basics that I have learned over my years of getting outdoors with ham gear. This video is a bit longer than my usual fare, so grab a cool drink, sit back and enjoy. My YouTube channel is named Outdoors on the Air. There were several factors that influenced my decision to go with that name. First up, I live on a small suburban lot. I have a 33-foot street frontage and 113 feet of lot depth. In addition to having a small lot, I have a number of tall trees in the backyard, with lots of low-hanging branches that do not allow for the erection of a good HF antenna up high and in the clear. The only way I can experience what it's like to operate with such an antenna is to go out to a park and set one up. Maybe by showing others my portable operations, I could help people who face similar challenges at home. Now let's talk about noise. Most modern suburban ham shacks feature high noise levels produced by a plethora of household devices. In my own case, even though I use line isolators to help mitigate this issue, I often face a 9 S-unit noise level on 80 meters. Set up a station far from suburbia, and you'll experience the pleasure of operating with noise levels as low as 1 S-unit. This makes an HF portable station potentially more effective than a modest home-based station, especially on the lower bands. I also took into consideration that many of our fellow hams are not in good health or are on the road to losing the decent state of well-being they currently possess. What could I do to encourage people like this to continue to embrace this great hobby of ours, but get them out of their shack chairs? Could I help motivate some of these folks to become more active, get some fresh air and exercise, and yet still enjoy the best ham radio has to offer? Next up, we don't have enough young hams in our ranks. Many of those people who could be attracted to our hobby don't want to be chained to a basement desk and chair as they partake in ham radio. Could the prospect of outdoor operations make this great pastime more appealing to them? Finally, we can't overlook the fact that ham radio can still play a vital role in the aftermath of natural disasters, like earthquakes and hurricanes. Every person who gains a measure of experience setting up and operating a portable two-way radio station learns the basics of what is necessary to provide beneficial assistance if the situation calls for it. Perhaps publishing videos coupling the hobby we love with outdoor activity could motivate people to get out and try it for themselves. I decided my YouTube channel's mission statement would be to encourage people to get outdoors and get on the air with HF Portable. My intention is to show people that operating a temporary station outside is fun, rewarding, and educational. Enough about me. Let's get into the topic of HF Portable. For those that may not be familiar with the terminology, let's define HF Portable. HF, of course, refers to high frequency, or operating on any of the HF bands, from 160 meters to 10 meters. We often consider the word portable to mean handheld operation, but in this case I am referring more to a tabletop setup. When I say portable, I am referring to setting up a temporary station someplace, where there are no facilities to easily accommodate such a station. The word portable is used to describe a station which can be set up, operated, torn down, and moved elsewhere fairly quickly. There are many ways to get active in HF Portable. Each of these has their own unique appeal. You could install an HF rig in your vehicle, drive to a remote location, and operate out of your car. You could take your gear to a local park, set up a low-to-the-ground antenna, and run the operation from a picnic table. After a couple of hours, pack it down, and you're done. My own personal favorite, and the one I'm going to position to you today, is to rent a campsite and set up a station that you can run for hours, have a nice campfire, sleep there, wake up and operate some more without having to set up all over again. Well, I am going to give you some helpful tips to mix camping and ham radio. Many of the tips I will give are applicable to other portable HF situations. So stay tuned, even if you're not a camper. Though many of you have a ton of knowledge in regard to radios and antennas, I'll tell you what I use and why I use it. I'm not going to tell you why you should get exactly what I have. Your gear is a personal decision, and choosing it is a major part of the fun of ham radio. What I will do is explain why I have each piece of gear, so you can follow my logic and consider applying it to your own decisions. First up, let's start with the transceivers. Yes, that's a plural. You do not need 2 transceivers, at least to start, but I would recommend that you consider owning 2 that you can take on your portable outings. This is why. The U.S. Navy SEALs have a motto: 2 is 1, 1 is none. If you go to all the trouble to collect your gear, pack it up, take it to the site, put up your antenna, and then turn on your rig only to find your beloved portable radio is not functioning, all your hard work has been wasted. By taking a second rig, you have given yourself a backup plan. And by the way, this thinking is true for your other gear, too. Maybe I'm an extremist, but I also take spare microphones, coaxial cable, and even antennas. By taking all this gear, when I go HF portable camping, I know I am going to be operating. You're probably now figuring out one big reason I like to go camping when I set up HF portable. I've got a lot of gear to take along, so I might as well pack a little extra and settle in when I get there. Now that we have that out of the way, I have 3 HF portable transceivers. The first one is my Yaesu Ft897d. If you're not familiar with the 897, it's a 100-watt rig that covers from 160 meters to 70 centimeters in all modes. While the 897 is a good rig, it certainly pales in comparison with more modern rigs like the Yaesu Ft991A, the successor to the 897 in Yaesu's line. But where the 897 shines is in its power consumption on receive. The 897 draws about 600 milliamps in receive mode. This is significantly less than what the 991A draws. You'll notice I am referring to how much the rig draws when receiving. You might be asking yourself why I worry about that rather than how much it draws when transmitting. Here's the reason. Even if you are in a contest situation where you're transmitting a lot, the chances are excellent the rig will be in receive mode far more than it will be in transmit mode. The lower the amps a receiver draws, the longer your battery life will be. We'll talk more about batteries in a moment. Back to the 897. In addition to the relatively low current draw and receive, as previously stated, the 897 provides access to the VHF and UHF bands. It's easy to see how this capability could be useful in an emergency situation. When I operate HF portable with the 897, I run it at 20 watts. I know what many of you are thinking at my mention of that. Why would I only run 20 watts from a rig capable of 100? Here's why. If I wanted to increase reception of my signal at the receiving station's end by 1 S-unit, I would need to quadruple my output power, presuming I am continuing to use the same antenna system. Of course, quadrupling a 5-watt signal gives me 20 watts. If I want to increase my signal at the receiving station by another S-unit, I would need to pump out 80 watts. That would put a serious drain on my battery and reduce my operating time significantly. In my estimation, bumping power up to 80 watts is not worth doing for a 1 S-unit increase. The second portable rig in my stable is a Yaesu Ft817nd. This is a QRP rig that tops out at 5 watts RF output. The 817 covers 160 meters to 70 centimeters in all modes. Similar to the 897, it has a low current consumption on receive. No doubt some of you are wondering why I take a QRP rig along. Very simply put, I enjoy the challenge of operating QRP, and I really don't believe in the concept of running a 100-watt rig at QRP levels. It's just too darned easy to crank the power back up if at first you are not getting through. In addition to this, QRP rigs draw far less power than 100-watt rigs. I can operate for a weekend on a QRP rig using a battery that will only last a few hours on a 100-watt radio. Further to my point about QRP, I have learned the conventional wisdom regarding QRP is wrong. It's important to note that a lot of people who have never operated QRP or have never operated QRP properly do not understand just how effective a QRP rig can be when paired up with a good antenna. Only on very rare occasions do I fail to make contacts running QRP. Many of you are CW ops, and this is an important consideration. CW ops have it even better than SSB ops, as QRP CW-only transceivers can be less expensive and work very well in the field. Speaking of CW, let's not forget that a 5-watt CW signal can get out as well as a 100-watt single sideband signal using the same antenna. While I cart along a 100-watt rig since I am a sideband op, those of you who intend to operate CW have no need for such high power. You'll notice that I use what are now considered old radios, and I'm kind of proud of that. I bought both radios on the used market, and they both perform very well. You really don't need the latest and greatest to be successful with your portable operations. In addition to the two aforementioned rigs, I recently purchased a Yaesu Ft891. While it draws considerably more power on receive than the Ft897, the 891 provides IF-level DSP noise reduction and bandpass filtering to allow for more comfortable operation in crowded band conditions like those experienced during field day. Of course, the rig is not actually the heart of your radio station. The power supply is. Presuming you will not have an electrical supply where you will be setting up, you'll need a battery of some sort. You have a few choices when choosing a battery for your portable ops. I'm going to limit my discussion to two of the most popular types. The first up is the new kid on the block, lithium iron phosphate. These batteries represent the effective state-of-the-art where ham radio is concerned. They have two key characteristics that make them a compelling choice. They have a third characteristic that makes them somewhat less so. The two positives: longer operating time under high loads and lightweight. The downside, compared to the next option, they are quite expensive, though they are becoming less so. Your second choice, SLA batteries, also known as sealed lead-acid batteries. When compared to the lithium-ion batteries, SLA batteries have two downsides and one big upside. SLAs are very heavy, and the operating time under high loads is not as long as the lithium ions, but, and this is a big but, they are cheap. For the record, I use a mix of both. But you should know, if you really want to run 100 watts when portable, you'll want lithium iron phosphate. After the power supply, the antenna system is the absolute most critical part of your station. First, I make a point of using the term antenna system. You must take into consideration the coaxial cable, any devices inserted into the cable, like antenna tuners and line isolators, and the antenna itself. It's all part of your antenna system, and the quality of each of these components will heavily factor into your success, or lack thereof. As discussed before, take backups. That means take two antennas, 2 runs of coax, and extra dual SO239 barrel connectors. Not sure how much coax you'll need to get from the feed point of the antenna to the rig? Take extra. You're making a significant effort to get out there, and you have high hopes of a successful outing. Don't let a bad piece of gear make you go home with your tail between your legs. Additionally, I urge you to test your coaxial cables before taking them into the field. If you have a dummy load, use that to conduct your tests. If you don't have a dummy load, consider getting one for this reason, if for nothing else. Check the coax connectors for cold solder joints. We often forget that coax cable is both fragile and a consumable. It needs to be replaced at some point. If you find a cable that is funky, throw it away immediately, or it may sneak along with you on a future outing. Okay, so your cable is good. Now we get to talk about some sacred cows. Remember this, there's nothing particularly special radio-wise about a field radio deployment. The same rules that work well for your home station will apply to your portable station. When it comes to antennas, the one that works best is a full-sized half wave for the lowest band you want to operate on, put up high and in the clear. I'm not a fan of low-to-the-ground, loading coil whip antennas, or those that need counterpoises. A lot of hams equate HF portable with these compromise and often expensive antennas. Yes, there are a lot of hams using these antennas for portable ops. Yes, they make some contacts. But I want you to think carefully about this. Have you ever heard someone say, "This antenna really works. If I can hear them, I can work them"? That statement doesn't mean a thing. With a compromise antenna, you may be hearing some stations, but there are a whole bunch you are not hearing, and therefore have no chance of working. A lot of hams have paired costly, low-to-the-ground compromise antennas to low-powered rigs, and been bitterly disappointed with the results. They mistakenly put the blame on the low power level, not the antenna. To have an effective portable station, you must have an antenna that will approximate the performance of a typical 100-watt home station. You might laugh out loud at that, but think of those operators you have heard on the air that only have a dipole up at 20 feet. There's a ton of them. If I can put up a dipole in the field at 30 feet, and I run with a 20-watt station, I am now running very close to the effectiveness of those 100-watt stations. In addition, due to the lower band noise in the field, I can be even more effective than those suburban base stations. But you cry out, it takes time to put up a dipole at 30 feet. Yes, it might. But I've got a suggestion that can reduce your antenna raising time significantly, as well as broaden your choice of operating locations. I'm a big fan of telescopic fiberglass poles. These are compact to transport, but are available in heights up to 72 feet. My own favorite is the DX wire 50-foot mast. Using this mast and the pole mount shown in this photo, I can have the midpoint of a dipole, or far end of an end-fed sloper up at 40 feet in about 20 minutes, and I'm slow. Why put the wire at 40 feet and not 50 feet if the mast is 50 feet high? Because the poles get thinner near the top and will bend. At 40 feet, the DX wire mast is still stiff enough to hold the wire up while standing straight and tall. Note the antennas I am referring to are full half-wave antennas. I don't use compromise antennas in the field. I will only erect full-size wire antennas for the bands I wish to operate, and those I will put up as high as I can get them. For example, if I want to operate 40, 20, and 15 meters, I will put up a 40-meter off-center fed dipole, or end-fed antenna that is also resonant on the higher bands. Of course, if you plan to operate on 40 meters, you are going to erect a 66-foot wire, and you'll need an appropriately sized site to do that. Which brings us to the topic of choosing a campsite. Just before I get started on that, though, let's spend a moment addressing why I like camping when I go HF portable. First up, my own personal time is precious and scarce. When I'm not camping, I am in family mode and interruptible. Even if I do get to sneak away for a few hours, I find it a bit disappointing to have to stop what I am doing and return home. Conversely, if I go camping for the weekend, the time is mine. Ideally, I go out on a Friday night, set up the campsite, spend Saturday morning setting up antennas, and then spend the rest of the day on the air. I know I can leave the radio gear set up overnight, and on Sunday morning pick right up where I left off. Having a campsite also means I have a piece of property that is all mine. Nobody is going to grouse at me for infringing on their space while I set up the antenna. Conversely, if I just show up at a park for a few hours of operating, I am at the mercy of the crowds that came before me as far as operating location goes. If you choose to go camping for your HF Portable Ops, here are a few tips I have learned along the way. First up, if at all possible, go and scout out the campsites at the park you are interested in before reserving a specific site. Doing so will give you the opportunity to see how friendly the site is to setting up an antenna. Is the site wide open or covered with low-hanging tree branch bramble that would make getting your wire up high an issue? Is the site long enough to allow you to set up a full half wave for the lowest band you intend to operate on without putting a big bend in the antenna? Does the site provide shade for the operating position if the weather is hot? Is there a natural wind break for the prevailing wind? Is the site on a hill or down in a dip? Of course, the higher the site is above surrounding terrain, the better. Finally, you might be interested in having some privacy to avoid unwanted attention while setting up and operating your station. One thing I've started doing when booking a campsite is checking the descriptions on the online booking sites where available. When I am planning a trip to a park I've never been to before, and it's too far away to visit in advance, I look at the photos and carefully review the descriptions for size and some of the details I've mentioned. I also don't mind paying a few extra dollars for a site that is listed for large mobile homes. Even though I drive a car, those larger sites give me the space I want to get a longer wire up comfortably. Well, you've got your gear all ready to roll. You've got your site booked. Now you have to deal with potentially the most important logistic of all. You will need shelter if you're camping, or if you will just be out for most of the day before retreating to the world of modern conveniences. Unless you live in the desert or the weather report is extremely favorable, count on rain. Even if it doesn't rain, you might have to deal with hot, humid weather or high winds. The old Boy Scout motto is, of course, to be prepared. Just as we don't want to curtail an outdoors radio excursion due to equipment failure, why call it quits just because the weather isn't ideal? Pack clothing options and shelter gear for all possibilities. So let's run down the list of my go-to shelter choices. My primary shelter is a 5-man tent. The inside ceiling height is almost 6 feet. A tall inside height makes all the difference, not just from a practical perspective, but from a psychological one. You won't feel as claustrophobic in a tall tent. The biggest issue you'll find with tall tents is that they may not stand up well in strong winds. To help mitigate this, use all the tie-down points provided on the tent fly and stake them out securely. My current tent is not a cheap Walmart special, but I started with one of those, then later upgraded. The tent is large enough for me to set up a wide table and still have room for a sleeping pad and my sleeping bag. If you do have a less expensive and less weather-worthy large tent and you're expecting rain, raise a tarp over the tent and make certain it's not resting on the tent. This will take the bulk of the rain and drain it off to the sides, not giving it a chance to soak through the tent fly and roof. Also, put a large tarp on the inside floor of the tent in case water starts to pool inside. Make sure the tarp is a larger dimension than the tent floor. This will help keep the water from getting on top of the tarp. Packing a large sponge for mopping up is a good idea. Installing the inside tarp has the side benefit of keeping the tent floor clean, as it will not be exposed to dirty, muddy footwear. After your portable operation, you'll find it's a lot easier to clean a tarp than a tent floor. Now, if the weather is going to be hot, you're not going to want to be inside a stuffy tent. You have multiple options for this situation. A tarp set up over your operating table will provide some relief from the baking sun, but still allows for refreshing breezes to come in. In this situation, try to find a place on your site with some natural shade and set up there. Be mindful the sun is moving, so it's best to choose a spot that will provide shade in the afternoon. My favorite warm weather shelter is my Eureka No Bug Zone. This is simply a tarp with mesh walls that can be pulled aside when there are no mosquitoes or black flies to contend with. This shelter is much easier and faster to erect than a tarp. One final point about your shelter. Before choosing your shelter placement, see if you can discern where water will pool in the event of heavy rain. You'd be much better off to put your shelter on the high side of the slope rather than the bottom. If water pools in one spot in your site, you don't want to be stuck in that spot during or after a storm. Fantastic! You've packed your gear, reserved your site, and the station is now all set up. The antenna is working fine, and your power supply and rig are working up to spec. Now to the operating. You've looked forward so much to this moment. If you are at a recognized park, I recommend doing a Parks on the Air activation. This will have other hams looking for you on the frequency you're on. Spot yourself on the POTA page and call CQ Parks on the Air. If you've done a good job with your antenna and band conditions are favorable, you'll start to make contacts. But what happens if you start to call CQ and no one is coming back to you? If you're running low power as I do, be patient and persistent. You might need to change tactics and abandon your POTA activation. In situations like this, I will look for nets to check into and special event stations to put some contacts into the log. They are listening, and as long as you are using a good antenna up high, you'll probably be surprised at the positive signal reports that come back your way. Finally, let's address one of my favorite options. I like to go out HF Portable on weekends when a contest is running. I find this gives me a very good chance of making contacts, as there are a lot of stations calling CQ and listening for responses. During contests, I tend to spend my time on 40 meters and 15 meters. In general, I find 20 meters is just too crowded during the big contests. Everyone knows that during contests, the bands go crazy. During big contests, powerful stations clog the bands from bottom to top. Why would I even think of operating low power during a contest? Here's why. In 2019, when everyone was complaining about poor HF conditions, while camping on the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband DX Contest weekend, I ran 5 watts from a Yaesu Ft817 and made QRP contacts to South America, Europe, and Africa. It was pouring rain and cold outside, but I was happy and warm inside the tent, living my ham radio dream. Low power works even during big contests. We're almost done, but I'd like to address those of you who might have some doubts with regard to your own ability to get out and try this HF Portable stuff. I haven't mentioned this up to now, but here is a bit more background information on myself. I don't sleep well, and I haven't for many years. As a result, I often suffer from serious fatigue during the day. I have recurrent neck issues that come from sleeping in awkward positions. The pain that results often ends in migraine headaches. I experience all of these things while camping and operating HF Portable. The bottom line, if I can operate in this type of activity, chances are you can too. Don't sell yourself short. Get out there and see for yourself just how much fun HF Portable is. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I truly appreciate it. Now it's your turn. Get out of the shack, get outdoors, and get on the air. 7-3 from Tracy, VE3, TWM.